Welcome to this week's Newsnight video podcast, and thank you very much for making us #1 in the iTunes News podcast in the UK and propelling us into the top 10 in the main chart. We start with the police announcement on Thursday that they had disrupted a major terrorist raid on planes flying from the UK to the US. The Home Secretary announced that they made a series of arrests. He said that they thought they had all the major players. Now, throughout the day and indeed beyond, all travel from UK airports was either cancelled or disrupted. That was the case too, both in Europe and in the US. Mark Urban took a closer look at a day of intense police and security activity.
By the time the police triggered last night's arrests, they believed that terrorists were planning to blow up airliners almost simultaneously over the Atlantic. The result, at this peak season for air travel, could have been thousands killed. If the bombs had all claimed their targets over the ocean, the first the authorities would have known about it was when the radar traces would have disappeared from their screens.
We are confident that we have disrupted a plan by terrorists to cause untold death and destruction and to commit, quite frankly, mass murder.
There are hundreds of Muslim Britons under surveillance. But about 6 weeks ago, a particular group of them living in East London began to move up MI5 and the Metropolitan Police's priority list. There were links too to people in Birmingham and High Wycombe.
During the investigation, an unprecedented level of surveillance has been undertaken, and that surveillance has had as its objective to gather intelligence and evidence in support of the investigation. We have been looking at meetings, movements, travel, spending, and the aspirations of a large group of people.
By last weekend, the activities of these suspects were causing sufficient concern that they were being discussed at the highest political levels. Tony Blair alerted President Bush on Sunday to the possible conspiracy. A couple of days later, the British began feeding specific intelligence from their surveillance operations to the Americans, as it was becoming sufficiently precise to pinpoint the danger to certain air routes. British counter-terrorist experts believed the conspirators were going to target planes belonging to Continental, United, American and British Airways, taking off from Heathrow and Manchester with destinations of New York, Washington and Los Angeles.
I would say that this plot was well advanced. In other words, they had accumulated and assembled the capabilities that they needed, and they were in the final stages of planning before execution. I don't want to get very specific for investigative reasons about each individual step, but this is not a case where this was just in the initial thought stage. There were very concrete steps underway to execute all elements of this plan.
But when would the plot go into action? The key information came just 24 hours before the arrests.
According to people in the counter-terrorist community, a deciding factor in triggering the arrests was information provided by the ISI, Pakistani military intelligence. They picked up a person closely connected to the British suspects a couple of days ago. This arrest provided indicators that the plotters intended to launch their attack within days. President Musharraf's people had dramatically proven their value to Britain and America, and a decision was made last night in London to arrest the suspects.
At 10 o'clock last night, ministers were briefed, and less than 2 hours later the arrests started, with raids in High Wycombe and East London. Addresses in Birmingham were also visited by plainclothes police. At 2 a.m, MI5 officially raised the level of Britain's terrorist alert status to critical, suggesting an imminent attack. It then fell to the Home Secretary to tell the country what was going on.
The police, acting with the security service MI5, are investigating an alleged plot to bring down a number of aircraft through mid-flight explosions, causing a considerable loss of life. The police believe the alleged plot was a very significant one indeed.
With the announcement made, airlines had to respond to the possible threat. The warning sent to them said, no liquids or gels of any kind would be permitted in carry-on baggage. As word travelled, queues built and some airlines decided to cancel flights to London, a domino effect of fear and insecurity. The warnings suggested a bomb that would be carried on in liquid or viscous form. The liquid, in a drinks bottle or can, could be set off by a simple detonating device concealed in a phone or other electronic equipment. Even a few pounds of such a compound, placed against the side of the fuselage, could bring down an aircraft. What's more, an Al-Qaeda plot 11 years ago to destroy several airliners relied on just this form of attack. Ramzi Youssef took liquid explosive onto an airliner and used a modified Casio watch as a detonator. The plane survived the blast, but one passenger was killed. Across the Atlantic, aware of how many American lives may have been saved, they praised Britain's action.
The recent arrests that our fellow citizens are now learning about are a stark reminder that this nation is at war with Islamic fascists who will use any means to destroy those of us who love freedom, to hurt our nation.
The issue of what devices, if any, the suspects had prepared will become vitally important over the coming days. If no explosives or suitable chemicals are recovered, then inevitably questions will be asked about how close the plan really was to execution. Police searches of several properties continue tonight, but so far there appear to have been no breakthroughs on the explosives. All of this goes to highlight the difficulty of judging when a potentially catastrophic terrorist plot should be interrupted.
We are trying to balance the need to ensure that the public have as much information as we are able to give them, while recognising that these matters are not only ongoing operationally, but are also likely to be the subject of future criminal proceedings.
The search for evidence carries on tonight, but there's satisfaction in Whitehall at action that officials feel may have averted a slaughter more terrible than that in New York almost 5 years ago.
Earlier in the week, it had been the conflict in the Lebanon that dominated all the news stories. It's been another bloody week with deaths on both sides and many civilians wounded or killed. But can we trust all the appalling images coming from the Middle East? Reuters issued a statement saying they would not be using one particular photographer after it transpired he had doctored an image. Here's Tim Hugh, and his report contains some disturbing pictures.
This is the image of an Israeli attack on Lebanon sent out to news organisations around the world. This, it's alleged, the slightly less dramatic sight the photographer actually witnessed in the sky above Beirut. Not 3 flares, but only 1. This is the picture of smoke rising from the bombed southern suburbs of the city he sent to the Reuters news agency. Much denser and darker than in the photo he originally took. The alterations came to light when several websites claimed the images showed obvious signs of being doctored by computer software. Many photojournalists agree there's obvious manipulation.
He's darkened the sky, and on the sky he's decided, again as I said, it looks like he's just been tapping around, bringing the sky up. It was so badly done. I mean, an amateur could do better. But that looks like what he's been doing, just... And again, if you look at the one it came out, look, it's boom, 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 the paintbrush marks. It's pathetic, really.
Reuters today issued this statement.
Reuters has withdrawn from its database all photographs taken by Beirut-based freelance Adnan Hajj after establishing that he had altered 2 images since the start of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Manipulating photographs in this way is entirely unacceptable and contrary to all the principles consistently held by Reuters throughout its long and distinguished history. It undermines not only our reputation, but also the good name of all our photographers. The mere fact that Hajj had altered 2 of his photographs means none of his work for Reuters could be trusted, either by the news services or its users.
Tonight, on the line from Beirut, Adnan Hajj spoke exclusively to Newsnight, giving his first reaction to the allegations.
Hello.
Hello, is that Adnan Hajj?
Hello.
Do you speak English?
Yeah.
Mr. Hadj, can you tell us why the photos were changed, if they were changed?
بنظف الغبرة اللي موجودة على الصورة.
I was cleaning the dust that was on the picture. I didn't add any flame and I didn't add anything else. I cleaned the dust and sent the picture.
Can I ask one last question? What about the other picture, the picture of the F-16?
لا مضبوطة ما فيها مشكلة أبدا.
No, it's perfect. There's no problem with it at all. I took the picture from the area of Nabatea and there's no problem with it, not at all.
Recently, the Daily Mirror was hoaxed by posed pictures supposedly showing abuse of prisoners by British troops in Iraq. Deliberate faking is one thing. It's condemned by all reputable news organisations. But in the fog of war, there are other forms of manipulation that are less easy to detect. And it's alleged that in South Lebanon, some images shown around the world may be the result of stage management of events by the organisation which can sometimes control access by journalists to the areas affected by Israeli bombing. And that's the militant group Hezbollah. On July the 30th, Israeli bombardment of the town of Qana killed 28 Lebanese, including 16 children. Pictures of the youngest victims being carried out of the rubble are already among the defining images of the conflict. But this website alleges the bodies were being transported purely for the benefit of the cameras by two men who weren't rescuers, but were acting on behalf of Hezbollah.
The disaster scene was set up, if you like, as a theatre set, where certain scenes were staged for the benefit of the media, and the whole thing became not a record of a rescue, but one vast, grotesque theatre staged to maximise, to milk as much sympathy, as much empathy, and as much shock out of the situation as was possible.
The Daily Telegraph was one of several British newspapers that published pictures of the recovery of children's bodies from the wreckage. Staff say they came from reputable agencies that would not have allowed themselves to be manipulated. But in any case, the basic truth the pictures convey is undeniable.
I think it's limited. I think if there is a case here where Hezbollah are staging pictures for the benefit of the Western press, that's an issue. It's something we need to investigate, and it has been investigated by the agencies, and maybe working practices need to be changed as a result. But in terms of that specific image, it's a man with a dead child in his arms, and that child was killed in the bombing at Qana. So in that sense, it does reflect the story.
Images of events like Qana will continue to be picked over, particularly by internet bloggers, for evidence of inconsistencies. How many are evidence of manipulation still isn't clear, but there'll be many more attempts to influence the outside world in a war that's about propaganda as much as force of arms.
After images like that, it's hard to imagine Beirut as the Riviera of the Middle East, but it was just that once, before decades of civil war and cross-border conflict. But Newsnight has been given some access to extraordinary archive footage which has just been rediscovered after 40 years hidden in a private archive. Here is Lebanon and Israel, as seen by the British filmmaker Harold Boehm in the 1960s.
At Beirut, the jet set arrive in the same way as they do at all the airports in the world. Only here can it be said that nothing is different. The calculated efficiency of the 20th century way of travel is taken for granted. The heart of the capital is the Place des Martyrs, almost an international crossroad. Life can be fun in the modern manner, and life can be fun in the traditional tone too. In the markets or souks, it's all on display, yours for the asking, providing you pay. Magnificent villas stand at the ocean side, where fun under the sun is the order of every day. Riding along on the crest of a wave. Whilst back at the ski club, they have just about everything, if you see what I mean. it would be too obvious for me to say that people seldom tire of looking at Tyre, so I won't. Tyre, spelt T-Y-R-E, is very, very old. They really dig this place, and each year they find it's older than they thought it was. A Roman tomb was discovered recently, almost intact. 6,000 feet above sea level, in the land of Lebanon, stand the world-famous cedar trees, the emblem of the country and one of its most precious relics. The cedars are situated today in the middle of a paradise for skiers. Catch a cable car up to Harissa. And on the way up, become bedazzled by the beauty which billows out below. The Bay of Junee stretches away one of the most thrilling views in the Middle East. Whilst we look at the delightful architecture of the homes of today, it is fascinating to think of the age-old traditions of the country and the number of civilizations whose relics are piled onto a land which is no more than 150 miles long and 50 miles wide.
And when at last you reach your destination, the thrill, the excitement, the anticipation. My first impression of the country was certainly completely different from both of yours. The first thing I saw was the magnificent view from the summit of Mount Carmel, which takes in the whole of Haifa. Of Israel's three cities, I think Haifa is the most beautiful. Culture and elegance are found side by side with flowering trees, parks and gardens. In the wide thoroughfares, which remind me of the boulevards of Paris, outdoor cafes abound where you have your drink and watch the world go by. Tel Aviv is a metropolis where west meets east by day and by night, when the lights spring to life, signs dancing and beckoning in a blaze of electric glory.
A last look at Beirut. Its beach washed by the bluest of oceans. A last look at the cedars on their slopes of snow. 300 sunny days. 300 moonlit nights. That is the legacy of the Lebanon.
Finally, Newsnight's ethical man, Justin Rowlett, thinks he's been doing a pretty good job during his year of living ethically. He's rigged his home to be more energy efficient, he's tried to save water, and he's even given up the family car. But at the Big Green Gathering Festival, he met around 20,000 people, many wildly dressed, some not dressed at all, even more devoted to saving the planet.
The Big Green Gathering boasts it is the biggest green festival in the world. 20,000 eco-warriors, or at least eco-warriors, scattered around a few Somerset fields. It should be the ideal place for me to learn a little more about ethical living. The Big Green Gathering brings together many different parts of the green movement. These people say they've taken their clothes off as a protest against our dependence on oil.
Once you do it, you find that you're free.
Yeah, I suspect you quite enjoy this, don't you?
Yes, once you've done it. Exactly.
I
You
think
start
anyone
off.
would, once they get into it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, you begin
positive.
thinking, oh, I've got to take my clothes off, but you end thinking, this is the end of ambition, this is the end of capitalism.
The event has its roots firmly in the free festivals of the 70s, and 3 decades on, its roots are certainly showing. So what can a bunch of hippies tell the rest of us about environmental living? Well, quite a lot actually. The man behind the event, Brig Ubridge, says the Big Green Gathering should be an example to us all.
It's showing people what can be possible, what actually can be so easy, how much you can do with little wind turbines that are hardly bigger than a satellite dish that everyone could have on their roof. With solar panels you could have on your roof.
Is that where all the power for this festival comes from?
That's where it all comes from.
No generators hidden behind the stalls here?
No generators at all. You won't hear the thump of a diesel generator anywhere on this site, and if you did, security would come and close it down.
This venue can hold 1,000 people and has a full sound system and lighting rig. And it's all powered by these. The system that you run in here is really low power use, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, lighting...
Less a third of what it would take to run my toaster, and you're running an entire venue.
Well, our lighting rig, which is an LED rig, uses less than 250 watts, which is, you know, less than a computer monitor. The sound rig's equivalent to a conventional 10,000 watt system, but because we use 12 volt equipment and low energy as much as we can and very efficient use of the energy, then we get away with about 1,000 watts.
And Andy's not the only person here developing the latest green technologies. How about external combustion engines?
These engines will run on any fuel. In this case, we're just running them on meths, which is alcohol fuel.
Right.
But we could run these on sunflower oil or anything else renewable.
And if that doesn't spin your wheels, what about one of these?
So what's this? Okay, these are wind generators that we buy literally in from Shanghai.
Oh, bloody hell, it weighs a ton!
Absolutely. Well, this is capable of producing up to 300 watts.
Right. All for 265 quid?
£265.
In fact, there are environmental entrepreneurs all over the festival.
This is the UK's first biodegradable bottle, that's what it is.
So how long will it take to biodegrade this?
It will take less than 12 weeks if it's done commercially.
Or how about a pedal-powered washing machine?
If the power went down, if infrastructure failed suddenly for a week or so, how would we, basic...
How would we wash?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what everybody's asking.
So I built myself one.
When disaster strikes, you'll have a lovely crisp white shirt. Yeah. That's the important thing, isn't it? Well, I always think it's important to be well dressed on all occasions.
Totally.
Not everyone is looking to the future. Some favour more traditional technologies.
We invented the wheel for horse to pull along, to make it easier on the horse, to get our stuff about and be useful to us. They plough the ground, and ploughing's farming. And farming's food.
But we then developed engines. That's what horsepower is, isn't it? And you can now get a sort of 600 horsepower engine. Why wouldn't you go with that instead?
Because this can eat that and refuel itself. Do you mean overnight when it's ready to go in the morning?
As we went round the festival, we ran into a few of our ethical friends. Danny Dink and his rinky-dink machine. It was Danny who showed me how much effort it takes to power a 100-watt light bulb.
5 minutes.
You won't be surprised to hear that this festival is big on recycling. And down at the dump, who's building the compost heap? It's our composting guru, John Cossum. The last time I saw him, I was inspecting his composting toilet. So, John, this is... I'm
completely
just breaking
composted.
up. This is your poo. Well, it smells like a lovely, clean,
Yeah,
dark
it's fantastic,
earth.
isn't it?
Yeah, you ready, Matt?
Get it up. This is,
Right. Oh, that is revolting, John. Get in there. There's no question that the Big Green Gathering is an inspiring example of how much greener all our lifestyles could be. But take a look at the car park. The owners of all these cars have chosen, like me, to drive to a green festival. We clearly have a long way to go.
That's it, and thank you once again for making Newsnight's video podcast the top iTunes news podcast of the week. Let's do it again.